Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to go over the main gear that I use for my Tenkara fishing. So the rod, or the rods that I use, the lines that I use, the flies that I use, all of that stuff. In another video in the future I will talk about the net that I use and like the bags and pouches and accessories and everything else that I use. That'll be in the future. For now we'll stick to the rod. The rods, the lines, and the flies. So first let's talk about the rods. These are the most important thing. I have two rods. I've had a third rod, but I sold it. The rod that I used to have, it was a super cheap Chinese-made rod from Amazon. If you search for Tenkara rod on Amazon, you'll see one from Wild Water. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, Wild Water. And so I bought their 12-foot Wild Water Tenkara starter kit. Came with a rod and a furled line and some tippet and some flies and a fly box. And you know, I bought that when I didn't know anything about Tenkara and I hadn't really talked to anyone about it. And it wasn't a great rod, basically. It was good enough. You know, I caught a lot of fish with it, but it didn't feel good. It was heavy and it was stiff, so I don't really recommend that one. The one I got after that was this one. This is the Zen Tenkara Suzume rod. This is a triple zoom rod, meaning that it can be fished at 3 different lengths. It like extends to be different lengths. And it says right here the lengths on the rod: 7 foot 7 inches, 9 foot 3 inches, and 10 foot 8 inches. So basically 8 feet, 9 feet, and 11 feet. This is a more expensive rod. This is a $200+ rod. In fact, both of these rods that I'll show you today are relatively expensive rods, $230 and up. And you know, I'm fine with spending money on rods. I'm not a wealthy individual, but for something that you use a lot, or that I use a lot anyway, you know, I'm gonna use these rods every week for years, unless I decide to sell them or whatever. And so over time, the difference between a $100 rod and a $200 rod really isn't all that much. And so I'm fine with spending more on a rod if it fulfills what I want it to fulfill, if it does what I want it to do. And so this has been a really good rod for me. I fish it every week. It is the primary rod that I use. I figure about 95% of the fishing I do is with this rod. I prefer to fish small creeks in the mountains, and so this is a great rod for that. And I really love fishing really small creeks, like creeks that you can jump across. And for that I use the shortest length here, the 8-foot length. And when I'm on bigger water, I'll use the longest length. I've also found that when I am fishing very small creeks, like when I am fishing the 8-foot length, I'll still extend it to the 11-foot length. Like for dapping. The creek will be too small, too narrow, too closed in by trees to actually cast the rod. But you know, if I have like a 7-foot line on here, I found it useful to extend it to the 11-foot length and just dap little, you know, pools, little pockets of water about that big. And I've caught a lot of fish that way. I bought this rod based off of the recommendation of Tom, Dr. Tom of Tenkara, which is a popular Tenkara blog. He lives and fishes in the same general geographical region that I do, northern Utah, eastern Idaho. And so we have similar styles and similar tastes, similar interests in our Tenkara fishing. He recommended this one with a few reservations that I also have. It can't be fully dissembled. You can't remove like the bottom couple of sections, which is odd. And on Tom's recommendation, I replaced the top 3 tip sections with I think it's the Tenkara USA Ito tip sections, because he felt that the standard tip sections, the standard ones, were just too, they weren't stiff enough. Now Zen Tenkara does sell what I think they call a performance tip set, and it is stiffer, but I just went with what Dr. Tom recommended, and it was cheaper anyway. So overall, it's a really good rod. I wish it could be completely taken apart, but you know, I like the weight, I like the zooming, and I like the handle. Overall, I think it's a good rod. There will be soon a pretty close competitor to this rod made by DragonTail Tenkara, which I hope to try out in the future. The DragonTail office is like 15 minutes from where I live, so hopefully I'll run into those guys and I can use that rod at some point in the future. But until then, this is the rod that I use, and I do like it. I have this on all of my rods. It's a piece of elastic, a loop of elastic that I've sewn and put on, and I just slid over the handle, and I use that to stick the fly into, so that I'm not attaching it directly to the cork here, and also I wrap the line around it, and I'll talk about that more in a future video. I do have the tip plug that came with it. I'm not a fan of the universal tip plug that a lot of people use. I think it's ugly, to be honest. And so I like to use the standard, the stock tip plugs whenever I can. It just looks much more sleek and streamlined as an object. Not that it really matters, but that's my preference. Okay, let's go on to the second rod that I use. This is the TenkaraBum 40, the TB40. This is a Japanese-made rod designed by an American, designed by Chris Stewart of TenkaraBum.com. And this is a 13-foot rod. It's a 400-centimeter rod, and this is my newer acquisition for bigger water and for small lakes too. I really haven't used it too much, to be honest. I've caught just a handful of fish with it, but I do like it. It is light, but just due to the nature of what I prefer to fish, I prefer to fish small creeks. Because of that, I'm mostly using the Suzume, and so I don't get to fish this really too often. But it is a good rod. It feels really good. It casts well. It took me a while to figure out how to cast it well. I'm not a Tenkara pro. I'm not a Tenkara master sensei guy. I just like to fish Tenkara, and these are the rods that I use. And so it did take me a while to figure out this rod. I realized that I need to fish it pretty slow for my casting style. I was used to doing it more quickly, to casting it more quickly, but as long as I cast slowly, it's beautiful. Casts a weighted fly very nicely. And so again, I have the loop of elastic here. It has a foam grip, a foam handle, as opposed to the cork handle of this one. I don't really have a preference. I guess I do prefer the cork, but the foam is nice too. It doesn't really matter all that much. I will be using this rod more this summer as I fish some larger creeks in the Yellowstone region. So that's it as far as rods go. I have these two rods. I am in the market for a very short rod, like a 5 or 6 foot rod, and so I might add that to my repertoire in the future. But between these two rods, I mean, this is between 8 and 13 feet, and I don't really see myself needing much more beyond the range that these rods can cover, except again for a small one. So let's go to the lines that I use. So these are my lines. I have them on these plastic Tenkara line cards. These are made in Japan, I believe. There's Japanese on them, and you can buy these from DragonTail Tenkara at DragonTailTenkara.com. And I use several of these, and I do something that I've never seen anyone else do. Most people just have one line on one of these cards, but I have flipped, I don't know if you can see this, I have flipped the little tabs. I've alternated them, so every other one I have flipped to the other side, so I can fit 2 lines on each card. And so usually I just keep all of these in my little Tenkara pouch, and I have 5 of these cards. Weighs nothing. I'm very concerned about weight and packability. I don't like the foam spools. I don't like the wooden spools. I don't like the plastic spools, the wider plastic spools. I like these very thin Tenkara line cards. And so I have different lengths on here. This one has 2 7-foot lines. This one has a 12-foot and a 4.5-foot. This one has a 13-foot. This one has 2 11-foot lines, and this one has 2 12.5-foot lines. When I'm fishing this rod in its shortest length, I use the 7-foot lines. When I fish it in its longest length, I use the 11-foot lines. This one I use either the 12 or 13-foot lines. And I have a few different brands of line. So these are all level lines. I prefer these to furled lines. I'll cut to the chase and say that my preferred line is an orange 3.5 level line. And again, from DragonTail Tenkara. I found the orange to be the most easily visible, and I like the size 3.5. I've never tried like a 4 or 4.5. I might like those more because I do fish in windy conditions, and the bigger the line you have, the easier it is apparently to cast in wind. But for now I've been using the 3.5 and I like it a lot. I did buy some I don't know if you can hear that, there's a cow like having a fit over there. I did buy some Daiwa. This is Japanese made line. It is number 3 and it's this like pink color. I don't like this nearly as much. I really don't like the pink color. It's very hard to see for me. It might just be like this line seems much more translucent, more see-through than the orange DragonTail Tenkara line. The orange DragonTail line is just much easier to see, and so I really don't like using this line. And so if I were to recommend one out of the ones that I've used, which admittedly is not a ton, I do like the DragonTail Tenkara 3.5 orange, and it's reasonably priced. And then as far as tippet goes, I do use 5X. I like to keep things simple. I don't use different sizes of tippet, and I don't use different sizes of lines. I like to just stick with one thing and use it. And so this is 5X fluorocarbon tippet from DragonTail Tenkara. It's made by Moonlit Fly Fishing, which is just a sister company to DragonTail Tenkara. And I really like this stuff. It works well and it's cheap. So what more do you need? To attach my lines to the rod tip, to the Lillian, you know, there are several different ways you can do it. You can just tie a knot directly in the level line and attach that to the Lillian. But I use a method that my friend taught me, and I don't know where he got it, but I've also seen Jason Class, that's his name, right? From Tenkara Talk, from the blog and YouTube channel, Tenkara Talk. He uses a method that I like and that I use also. So basically, I don't know if you can see this, but I have the level line, and then I have a loop of, this is actually 20-pound fly backing, fly line, like traditional Western fly line backing. I've tied that into a loop, and I'll put a link to Jason's video where he talks about this. Basically, I do what he does, but I think he uses an overhand knot to attach the line backing to the level line. Instead of that, I use a figure 8, and I use some super glue to really solidify the knot. And this line backing, this 20-pound fly line backing, I got it from Walmart. It was like $5 at Walmart, and there's a ton of it. It's more than you'll ever need. And so when I'm attaching a line to my rod, I'll use a little girth hitch or lark's foot, whatever you want to call it, to attach it to the Lillian. And then I guess really the only thing left to talk about are flies. So I am basically a one fly adherent. That is something you hear about in Tenkara. A lot of people will use just one fly. Well, not a lot of people. Some people have used just one fly for everything, for all their fishing. And again, you know, I'm not in this for like the gear and getting into like the technical details. I just want to have fun fishing and catch fish. So I just stick with primarily one fly. I used to use the Utah Killer Bug, which is a great fly, and then I added a soft hackle to it. Let's see if you can see this here. I doubt it, but I'll include some pictures or some close-up footage of it. Basically, I used to use a Utah Killer Bug, and now I use what I call Utah Killer Kabari, and it's just a Utah Killer Bug with a soft hackle with I think it's a sen or a hen saddle feathers. I tie all of these myself. The hook itself isn't super important. I think to myself that certain hooks work better than others, but then you know, I have a bad day with a certain hook that I thought was good, and you know, I get angry and switch to another hook. So the hook itself isn't super important. But again, I'm not affiliated with DragonTail Tenkara, but I do use their hooks, a variety of their different sizes or different shapes of their hooks, all in size 12. So basically, all of my fishing is done either on a Utah Killer Bug, at least it was in the past, and I still have some of them left, and so I will use those occasionally. But going forward, and for the last couple of months, all of my flies have been the number 12 Utah Killer Kabari. This batch that I made has a red tip here. The last batch had a hot pink tip. I don't know if it really matters, but I'll probably use the red going forward in the future. It looks more natural, it looks more aesthetically pleasing to my eye I don't know if the fish care. I've caught hundreds of fish with these guys. And so that's about it. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions about the gear that I use, specifically the rods, the lines, and the flies. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.